Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be more on the playoff coverage here. We have a good couple rounds of games here. If you look from the onset, we got Texas and Chicago playing in the AL best of sevens now, and then we have Toronto and Boston. So this is going to be a good couple series. We have a lot of good ball clubs once you get down to the final 8 teams here. In the NL, you see some really good talent on both Pittsburgh and St. Louis, Washington, and the Giants. Bunch of really interesting matchups. We'll start with the AL. Obviously, Boston Toronto is going to be a tough one for Toronto. They are matched against one of the powerhouses in baseball. They did finish the year on an absolute tear, so they had that going for them, a huge hot streak. As we talked about last round, same idea. They're pretty good pitching, top five in the AL in almost every category. They have a really good control staff that really plays consistently. The whole season, they had a nice bullpen ERA of 3.5, team ERA under 4, so really solid overall. And then on offense, like we talked about the story, they walk a lot and they play some pretty balanced offensive baseball with a decent amount of home runs, a little bit lower in the batting average, but they know how to score runs, and they won 91 games. So if you look at their first round there, they scored a ton of runs in a couple games against the Angels. They scored 11, and they scored 7, and then they scored 3-1-0 victory. That was a huge game. They got a big time game and knocked up the bullpen a little bit, even though Sixto Sanchez had a really nice start. The lefty Connor Prelip is had a huge game. As you can see, he's just on a crazy tear. Absolutely monstrous second half of the season. Really limits those home runs with a high movement, 3 really good pitches. So that was a really cool. And then they had another lefty here, Luke Little, played a really good game there. He had the let up the one run there, but then the other game he had 1.2 with 5 strikeouts. So big time power arm coming out of the bullpen there, and then the reliable Ty Tice limits those walks, came in there and shut it up. So really good game there. So then against Boston, the matchup is obviously going to be Boston's really heavy on the power bats. Boston's got a lot of juice in that lineup. They have a couple specialists that play. Giancarlo Stanton against lefties, and makes it really tough, that 80 power against lefties. And then against righties, they still have a lot of those good lefty bats. Lux and Devers are a really nasty combination of lefty bats in the middle there, along with Varsho. A couple switch hitters there that play a lot of minutes with Happ and Bailey. So they are really, really solid all around. They don't have a big weakness offensively. As you can see, they ranked first in pretty much everything. Huge weakness would be, I'm just kidding, but base on ball is only second. But obviously, just a really good team that doesn't have a glaring weakness. The only thing you're going to have to do against them is try to win a bunch of 6-4 games, 5-4, knock up some of that pitching. They have a couple. They have just the one big injury there to Nate Anderson is out for the season, but they're pretty much healthy. Otherwise, they got all their big guns there, Karinchuk, and they have a bunch of guys on hot streaks right now, as you can see. Syndergaard and Sale and Quantrill should be the names they're going in this series. Toronto bats. Better be ready to show up against, because it's a really nasty pitching squad there. So, like I said, you're going to have to score. You're not going to hold their offense that's first in absolutely every category to less than like 3 runs a game, most likely. I know it's small sample size. You might get a 1 or 2 games with like 1 or 0 runs if you have a good start, but generally you're just going to have to score a bunch of runs to beat them. So it's just got to pray to the out of the park gods. Should be a really interesting result there. So then in the other game, you have Texas here. Texas has a nice. I think they're going to switch that schedule so you get the away games. But Texas has a really nice put together team. They're really defensive focused. They have a historically great defense with 43 zone range. They're defense heavy at a bunch of different spots. Pretty good defensively catcher. Pretty really solid defensively in the infield there. Cologne and Acosta especially. Cologne is the defensive specialist at third base with 70 range. Played like a shortstop playing third. And then obviously Acosta is really nasty in the middle there with that 70 rating. Bannister's big time zone range in the middle. So they just don't really have a big weakness. Everyone's really solid defensively. And then pitching wise, they're probably a bit above average. They have 2 really good arms, and JT Ginn and McCullers in the starting rotation there. Hans Krause actually had a really nice season too. 208 innings, 1.1 whip. Really solid there. I think they had a bunch of guys play really well in that starting rotation. As you can see, they got 3 guys on fire too. Really, really solid, just overall ball club. Again, no glaring weakness. They don't have that like superstar surefire ace. I guess McCullers is pretty close though. McCullers is like a 33-year-old vet leading that squad. Had a couple of really consistent recent seasons in a row. But yeah, they don't have that. It's a tough matchup when you're playing the White Sox. So they got kind of like those three really big time talented pitchers, but they are young, so we'll see if the youth gets them a little nervous once it gets to the big stage here in the playoffs. Texas has a really balanced lineup too. You got lefty, righty, lefty, switch, righty, and then it's another switch hitter at the bottom here. So they got some nice platoon splits as you see, different lineups versus different sides. They have the switch hitting first baseman come in against lefties. Jeff McNeil is a really, and Bannister in the middle of that lineup are really big time contact guys, so they don't have those like low contact, high power guys. They're fairly consistent contact wise throughout the lineup. That's why they hit 262 as a team. Really solid overall. They're just not great at base running. So one glaring weakness that sticks out. The top like three and everything except for 15th in base running. But they do steal a lot of bases, so they're just aggressive on the base pass. It looks like got them caught a little bit in the regular season, trying to stretch doubles and triples most likely, but should be better come playoff time. And then obviously the pitching just performs so well. The really good stats all across the board here with defense. I think the defense really helped. If you look at their pitchers, they all kind of they're solid, but they definitely outperformed their ratings when it comes to FIP. Like their FIPs were pretty low compared to their ERAs. So what it means is like only a 4.6 FIP, 3.6 ERA, and then he had a 3.6 FIP, 3.1 ERA. So they're all like performing. This defense is so elite, it makes the pitchers look real good and get their confidence up, makes them perform really well and gets their stats up. So the defense is just what makes this team really special. And then we talked about the White Sox last video. They obviously have the big three pitchers, Jones, Massey, and Soto, and then they got the really solid balanced lineup. They got some power, they got some speed, they got some contact and low strikeout and Madrigal. And then they got Tyree Reed, a lot of athleticism, pretty solid defense overall. Pacheco is just injured one more day, it looks like, so that shouldn't even affect the series at all. Just the one game, actually, so that kind of hurts. But other than that, they're pretty good to go. They don't have any big injuries in the starting rotation there. Or the starting lineup, I mean. So yeah, really exciting matchup there. You get the heavy defense-focused Texas Rangers with the solid contact offense versus a really similar team, really heavy pitching. Both rank in the top three in all the pitching stuff. It's those two teams in Boston. They're top three in almost every category there. And then obviously the White Sox have more of a league average D, but still solid. And then offensively, they're really good. Probably just about the same as Texas there overall. Most of the stuff there, third in home runs, 217 home runs, pretty solid. So it should be a pretty balanced matchup. Those teams are both really solid, just about the same amount of wins, but just a really cool matchup there. So we'll see. I like the balance there. So Pittsburgh in the NL is matched up against St. Louis here. Kind of went last series how we thought with St. Louis. We figured, like in that video we talked about, they would have to hit a bunch of home runs in Coors to probably win that series, and it looks like they did. They hit a ton of runs there, 4 runs, 8 runs, and 10 runs in those 4 games. So they did get to that that Colorado staff that had a lot of movement. So this series, their matchup against Pittsburgh, who obviously is pitching is even better, so it'll be hard to score that many runs against those elite pitchers in Pittsburgh. Jack Flaherty is actually suspended for the first 4 or 5 games, which means he should be fully fresh if they get to that game 6. But Pittsburgh's the one team in the league that can probably handle an injury like that, just because they're the only team that's that deep pitching wise. They still have those other 3 stars, so they'll just have that guy fresh for later in the series. They just won't be able to use him for game 1 or 2. But St. Louis has a ton of power and athleticism. Another matchup I kind of like there. Pittsburgh has a big field, so it's really hard to hit home runs at Pittsburgh. So St. Louis, I think, might struggle quite a bit when they're on the road. At home, they should be a little better fared, but it's going to be tough to take a couple games in Pittsburgh. So they better be ready. Hold the Pittsburgh offense, because I think those should be some low-scoring games. I don't anticipate too many runs being scored and either side. And also the St. Louis has a bit of a pitcher's park too, so I expect a lot of like 3-1 games. But we'll see. I could be totally wrong on that. Pittsburgh has a really nice squad. We haven't talked about them much. They still, like I said, have Asa Lacy, the nice lefty, and then they got the 2 dominant righties there, Abreu, Beaver, obviously, and then you got a couple big-time stuff arms in the bullpen there, and Gradle, Forsythe, and Poppin. I wouldn't be surprised if Poppin ends up making a start to replace Flaherty in the first 4 games. We'll see if they roll with Andy Santana, though. Andy Santana was a huge pickup, really nice pickup in the traded this year in the offseason or whatever, and had a really solid season. Only 42 innings pitched, but some really nice ratios, and just yet another good, young, cheap, controllable arm for Pittsburgh. So we'll see what they decide to do pitching wise, but it doesn't really matter whether guys are starting to come out of the pen. Either way, they're going to have some really solid arms across the board. And then offensively, they're not going to hit a ton of home runs, but they are going to get a bunch of base hits. A lot of high contact guys, as you can see. They got like 9 guys here in the green for contact. A little bit of power. None of those like 70, 75 power guys, but a lot of consistent plus power tools. And then they got a little bit weaker on the eye, but still not terrible. Even their like second last guys are almost 50. So just consistent consistent approaches too. They're going to be really good defensively, like always, especially with Pete Armstrong in the middle there. So that's going to be a really fun series. Like I said, I'm guessing that it's just my guess would just be some low scoring games. We'll see if either team can offense can get going and kind of explode there and have a big series. So the other last matchup here we'll do is Washington. Washington has a matchup against San Francisco, which is a tough matchup. It's really hard to hit home runs in San Francisco, which is what Washington's offense is built around. Washington has a really, really, really nice squad there, though they don't just hit home runs. They do hit a lot of them, but they also get on base quite a bit. They walk a lot. They got a couple plus eyes, 80, 60, 60, 55, 55, 55. A ton of power, as I said, but they also have lots of contact, so it's not like they're all heavy power, low contact. Just a really good offense all around. The home runs might be limited, but I'd still imagine that they'll eat some runs there too. And then pitching wise is where it's going to be tough on Washington. It's a really good power heavy squad in San Francisco. Also, I think got pretty lucky with that Hudson Potts injury. I think he's gone for about half the series, but they still have Elliot Ramos. Elliot Ramos was like 80, 75 power, something crazy, and then you still got a couple like Luke Leto and a couple of those really nice bats. So it looks like Bayard will be pitching for sure. Giolito will be pitching early on, game 2 or 3, and then Kepner is a nice matchup. He had a really solid season. Woodruff is the number 4, it looks like, going in. He played pretty well at the end of the season, had a bunch of really long, consistent starts with a lot of pitches there. Didn't really let up too many get blown up much at all. Always between 1 and 3 runs, so a nice little way to finish the season. A nice hot streak there. A couple big appearances here by Will Smith in the wild card round, so that should be a good matchup there too. With San Francisco's that loaded squad we talked about in the last video in the wild card round, just a really balanced overall offense. Arenado, Potts, Leto is the heart of that offense. Rendon had a kind of a weak regular season, but in the playoffs, I'd imagine he will amp it up quite a bit there. A really solid defensive squad too. Leto obviously is just so good defensively. Him alone probably got him like half of that zone range, which ranked them first in the NL to make them have the best defense. And then offensively, they're right in the middle of the pack there. But just defense and pitching, they were just outrageous. Pretty much if they were strikeouts, the only thing they didn't lead the NL in. So just a fantastic season out of those guys. Joey Bart, big time power behind the plate, really plus flat. But so those shortstop and catcher were historically the weakest offensively. They have really plus players with big time bats there. So that makes that's kind of one of the main reasons. So they can just be so good defensively, even though they still have good offense with the offense heavy at those 2 spots. It's just a really special roster, really nicely put together in San Francisco there. Just an awesome team. So it should be a really good matchup with Washington. Washington has a really, really great offense, and San Francisco has really great pitching, so that's obviously going to be a really cool matchup. It's kind of like the unmovable, that's true, the unstoppable force versus the unmovable object. Love it. Can't wait to see that sim today. So I think that should be happening right now. So I'll end this episode and get it uploaded right away. Cheers, guys.